Why do some people walk into a room and immediately command attention, while others, just as intelligent, just as capable, just as deserving, get overlooked, talked over, and quietly dismissed without anyone feeling guilty about it? That question might sting a little. Because if you are honest with yourself, you have probably been on the wrong side of that dynamic at least once. Maybe more than once. You have worked harder than the people being promoted. You have given more than the people being chosen. You have been more loyal, more available, more willing, and somehow, inexplicably, that did not translate into respect. It translated into being taken for granted. Into being the person people come to when they need something, but disappear from when it comes time to acknowledge your worth. And the worst part is not even the situation itself. The worst part is not understanding why it keeps happening. Because when you do not understand why, you cannot fix it. So you keep doing the same things, being more accommodating, trying harder, giving more, and the cycle simply deepens. Here is what no one tells you: respect does not come from trying harder. It never did. And the people who naturally command it in every room they enter are not working harder than you. They are operating from a completely different set of principles, principles that were documented in precise, almost uncomfortable detail by a man who lived 500 years ago and understood human nature more accurately than most modern psychologists dare to admit. Niccolo Machiavelli did not write about kindness and approval. He wrote about power, about perception, about the specific, observable behaviors that cause some people to be taken seriously and others to be overlooked. And what he identified is as relevant to your career, your relationships, and your social standing today as it was in Renaissance Florence. Maybe more relevant. Because the world has become even more competitive, even more hierarchical, and even more dependent on the invisible currency of how others perceive you. This video is going to break down exactly what it means to increase your value and command real respect, not the kind that evaporates the moment you leave the room, but the kind that follows you, precedes you, and protects you. By the end, you will understand why the strategies most people use to earn respect are actually destroying it. And you will know what to do instead. Do not skip ahead. The insight that matters most to you is not in the first 5 minutes. If you are someone who has felt underestimated, overlooked, or quietly disrespected, and you want content that actually goes deep into the psychology of power and human behavior, subscribe to this channel and like this video. This is not surface-level motivation. This is strategy. And you deserve to understand it. Before we get into the specific principles, we need to establish something that most people are unwilling to confront. The reason most people struggle to command respect is not because they are lacking in talent, or intelligence, or effort. It is because they have been taught, directly or indirectly, that respect is something you receive by being agreeable, by being likable, by making yourself easy to be around and easy to accommodate, by dimming yourself just enough to avoid making others uncomfortable. And for a while, that approach feels like it is working. People smile at you. They seem to appreciate you. They tell you how great you are and how much they value you. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the dynamic shifts. The same people who praised your agreeableness start to use it. They become comfortable asking more and offering less. They stop seeing you as someone to impress and start seeing you as someone who will absorb whatever they put in your direction without complaint. This is not a theory. This is a pattern. And if you look back honestly at your own experience, you will likely recognize it. Machiavelli's entire philosophy was built around one deeply uncomfortable observation: people do not treat you according to who you are. They treat you according to what they believe you will tolerate. And what they believe you will tolerate is determined almost entirely by how you present yourself, what you allow, and what signals you send about your own worth. This means that the problem is rarely about other people's cruelty. It is about your own positioning. And positioning, unlike personality, unlike talent, unlike circumstances you were born into, is something you can change. But it requires understanding something that the world rarely teaches plainly: value is not just something you have. It is something you project, protect, and consistently demonstrate. And the moment you stop doing those things, even briefly, is the moment others begin to quietly recalibrate how much of it they are willing to assign to you. What follows is exactly how to stop that recalibration from happening, and how to reverse it if it already has. Part 1. Become difficult to replace. The first and most foundational principle Machiavelli's thinking points toward is one that almost no one takes seriously enough: if you can be easily replaced, you will be treated as replaceable. And being treated as replaceable is the opposite of being respected. This is not just a business principle. It applies to every area of life. In relationships, in friendships, in professional environments, in social circles, the people who hold the most influence are the ones who bring something specific, something uncommon, something that others cannot simply find elsewhere the moment a conflict arises or the mood shifts. Most people, when they want to increase their standing, instinctively try to become more likable, more present, more generous. And while none of those things are inherently wrong, they do not by themselves create the kind of value that commands respect. They create the kind of value that creates dependence without authority. People may enjoy you without taking you seriously. What creates respect is competence. Real, undeniable, visible competence in something that matters to the people around you. Machiavelli observed that a prince, or any figure of influence, retains power not primarily through charm, but through demonstrated capability. When you consistently produce results that others cannot replicate without significant effort, you become someone that people are cautious about losing. And caution is a form of respect. Not the warmest form, perhaps, but one of the most durable. The practical application of this is uncomfortable for many people, because it requires a shift in focus. Instead of asking what you can do to make people like you more, the question becomes, what can you develop in yourself that makes you genuinely difficult to dismiss? What skill, what judgment, what track record, what combination of qualities make someone pause before they consider underestimating you? This is a long-term project. It does not happen in a week. But it begins with a decision to stop optimizing for approval and start optimizing for irreplaceability. And those two targets pull in very different directions. There is also a psychological dimension here that Machiavelli would have recognized immediately. When you know you bring real value, when that knowledge is not dependent on someone else confirming it for you, something changes in the way you carry yourself. The energy shifts. You stop auditioning for people's respect and start assuming you already deserve it. And paradoxically, that assumption is often what finally earns it. People sense dependency the way animals sense fear. When someone radiates a quiet certainty about their own worth, not arrogance, not performance, but genuine groundedness, others instinctively calibrate their behavior accordingly. They become slightly more careful, slightly more considered. And that slight shift is the beginning of real respect. But that is only the beginning. Because competence alone, without the right presentation, can still fail to command what it deserves. And this is where most people make their second major mistake. Part 2. Manage perception as carefully as you manage reality. Machiavelli wrote something in The Prince that has made readers uncomfortable for centuries. He said, in essence, that people judge almost entirely by appearances, that the world is composed mostly of observers who respond to what they see, not to what is actually true. And because of this, a man who masters appearances holds power that a merely competent man does not. This sounds cynical. And in the wrong hands, it is. But the deeper insight here is not about deception. It is about the fact that perception is a real force in the world, one that either works for you or against you, whether you engage with it consciously or not. The person who ignores how they are perceived does not live outside the system of perception. They simply lose control of it. Others fill in the gaps. And those gaps are rarely filled with generosity. So what does managing perception actually mean, practically? It means several things operating simultaneously. It means the way you speak. Not just what you say, but how you say it. People who command respect do not rush their words. They do not fill silence with nervous qualifications or apologize in advance for opinions they have not even delivered yet. They speak at a pace that suggests they are accustomed to being heard. They do not over-explain. They do not perform enthusiasm. They say what they mean, with enough confidence that the listener feels the weight of it. It means the way you handle emotion in public. This does not mean emotional suppression, it means emotional placement. High-value people do not let frustration, anxiety, or desperation leak into spaces where it reduces their authority. They process emotion privately and present publicly. Not because they are dishonest, but because they understand that the boardroom and the social gathering require a different face than the one reserved for the people who have actually earned access to their interior. It means your relationship with silence. Most people are terrified of silence. They rush to fill it, and in doing so, they often give away more than they intended to. They overshare. They over-explain. They reveal uncertainty, anxiety, or need, things that the observant people around them quietly file away. The person who is comfortable with silence, who can sit in it without flinching, communicates something important, that they are not rattled, not desperate, and not in need of your validation to feel stable. And it means your relationship with scarcity. Availability is a signal. Not always a negative one, but constant availability, the kind that communicates that you have no higher priority than whoever is asking for your time right now, reduces perceived value in a way that even the most genuine warmth cannot compensate for. People treat what is rare with more care than what is abundant. This is not a flaw in human nature. It is simply how attention and value are allocated. None of this is about putting on a performance that has nothing underneath it. Machiavelli was clear that a prince who relied solely on appearance without substance beneath it would eventually be exposed, and when exposure came, the fall would be catastrophic. The principle is to match the perception to the reality, to ensure that how you carry yourself reflects the real value you are building, not a fiction. The problem most people have is not that they lack value. It is that they present it poorly. They present it apologetically. They present it with so many disclaimers and qualifications that the value itself gets lost beneath the hedge. And the world responds not to the value but to the hesitation around it. Most people miss this part completely. They think the work is in the doing. It is also, critically, in the showing. And there is a right and a wrong way to show it. Here is the point in this conversation where things get sharper. Because everything we have covered so far, competence, perception, presentation, these are the foundations. They are necessary, but they are not sufficient. There is a layer beneath all of this that separates people who are merely respected from people who are genuinely feared in the most productive sense of the word, people whose no carries weight, whose time is treated with consideration, and whose approval is understood to be conditional. That layer is about limits. About what you will and will not accept. About the signals you send, whether you are aware of it or not, regarding your own tolerance for mistreatment, dismissal, or exploitation. And this is where Machiavelli gets very uncomfortable. Because what he identified is that kindness without boundary is not virtue, it is vulnerability. And vulnerability, in competitive environments, is routinely exploited by people who have no malicious intention whatsoever. They simply follow the path of least resistance. And if you have made yourself into that path, they will continue walking it. Drop a comment and tell me, has there been a moment in your life when you realized that being too available, too agreeable, or too willing to accommodate actually cost you respect rather than earned it? When did that shift happen for you? I read the comments, and this one is going to open up a real conversation. Part 3: The power of limits, the weight of no, and the danger of endless availability. There is a social experiment that every person unconsciously conducts with every new relationship they enter. And the results of that experiment determine, almost entirely, how that relationship will function going forward. The experiment is this: the other person pushes, in small ways, to discover where your edges are. They are not necessarily doing this consciously. It is simply human behavior. We probe the environments we enter to understand what is solid and what will give. What we find shapes everything that follows. When someone discovers early on that your edges are flexible, that your no is negotiable, that your time can be claimed without much effort, that your discomfort can be spoken over without consequence, they do not consciously decide to disrespect you. They simply begin to operate within the reality you have shown them. And that reality, repeated across enough interactions, becomes the foundation of how they see you. Machiavelli understood this with razor clarity. He wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, not because fear is preferable in itself, but because love without respect is fragile. People love what is comfortable. They respect what has demonstrated that it has the capacity to withhold, to refuse, to hold a line. And it is the holding of lines, consistently and without drama, that builds the kind of authority that lasts. This plays out in remarkably practical ways. The colleague who says yes to every request eventually becomes the person expected to say yes. When they say no, finally, exhaustedly, it is interpreted as a malfunction rather than a boundary. Because the no was never established as part of the pattern. Whereas the person who says no early, clearly, and without excessive explanation trains those around them to understand that yes is a choice, not a default. And that makes the yes more valuable. In relationships, this is even more pronounced. The partner who is always available, always accommodating, always prioritizing the other person's comfort above their own sends a signal that is not warmth. It is insufficiency, a subtle communication that the relationship matters so much to them that they are willing to dissolve their own preferences to preserve it. And most people, receiving that signal, do not respond with more love. They respond with less respect. Not out of cruelty, but because that is how human psychology works. We value what we sense we could lose. We take for granted what we sense will always be there regardless of how we behave. The Machiavellian correction here is not to become cold or withholding in an emotional sense. It is to become selective. To make your availability, your attention, your time, your effort, all of these things, something that must be earned and maintained rather than something freely dispensed at the first request. And this requires the one skill that almost no one practices, the ability to disappoint people without explaining yourself into an apology. When you say no, and then immediately offer 3 reasons why you are saying no, followed by an alternative that partially satisfies the request anyway, you have not said no. You have said maybe, wrapped in the language of no. And everyone around you knows the difference, even if they do not say so directly. Real limits are quiet. They do not perform. They do not justify themselves at length. They simply exist, calmly, clearly, without negotiation. And the people who encounter that kind of limit for the first time often experience a subtle recalibration. Something in them registers that this person is different. That this person cannot be moved in the usual ways. And that recognition, whether they express it or not, is the beginning of genuine respect. But here is where it gets darker, because all of this raises a question that most people are afraid to look at directly. If boundaries create respect, and availability destroys it, then what does it mean that so many people have spent years being maximally available? What does that cost them? And more urgently, how do they reverse it without blowing up the relationships and environments they have spent years building? That answer is coming. And it is the most important part of this entire video. Here is the insight that changes everything, and the reason it comes at the end is because you needed everything before it to understand its full weight. Most people believe that respect is something others give you. A gift. A recognition. Something that flows toward you when you have done enough to deserve it. And so they spend their energy trying to do enough, to be good enough, reliable enough, available enough, capable enough, waiting for the acknowledgement to arrive. It does not arrive. Not because they are not worthy of it, but because they have fundamentally misunderstood what respect is and how it actually works. Respect is not given. It is assumed, or it is not there at all. This is Machiavelli's deepest secret, and it is the one that almost no summary of his work gets right. The prince who sits at the center of his philosophy does not go around earning respect through acts of merit. He assumes it. He operates from the premise that his authority is already established, not because he has been handed it by others, but because he has decided internally that it is real. And then he behaves consistently with that assumption, in every interaction, in every decision, in every moment where he could choose to shrink or to hold his ground. The people around him, observing this consistency, eventually calibrate to it. Not because they are submitting to a performance, but because consistent behavior, over time, reshapes the shared understanding of who someone is. What began as an internal assumption becomes an external reality. The respect was not earned through pleasing. It was built through repetition, the repetition of a man who treated himself as someone worth taking seriously, and behaved accordingly until everyone else caught up. This is the correction that changes everything. You do not need to wait for the world to decide you are valuable. You need to decide it first, and then behave from that decision with such consistency that the world has no logical alternative but to agree. That means no more apologizing for having standards. No more softening requests so much that they become impossible to refuse gracefully, making you seem entitled when people decline. No more over-explaining your choices to people who did not ask. No more making yourself smaller so that others do not feel threatened by your competence. It means walking into rooms with the assumption that what you bring matters. Speaking with the assumption that what you say is worth hearing. Setting limits with the assumption that your time and energy are finite, precious resources, because they are. And treating yourself as someone whose well-being is a primary responsibility, not a secondary luxury to be attended to after everyone else has been satisfied. Machiavelli's prince was not respected because he begged for it. He was respected because he never suggested, by any action or word or posture, that the question of his worth was still open for debate. He had already closed the debate internally. And everything else followed from that. The world will treat you the way you have taught it to. And you have more authorship over that lesson than you have ever been given credit for. Let us bring this together. Because everything covered in this video points toward a single, clarifying truth. Increasing your value is not about becoming someone else. It is not about performing confidence you do not feel or adopting a coldness that does not suit you. It is about closing the gap between who you actually are and how you actually present yourself. Most people have more value than they project. They carry it quietly, apologetically, with so many layers of self-diminishment wrapped around it that the people closest to them never fully see it. Commanding respect begins the moment you decide to stop shrinking that gap from the wrong direction. Not by inflating a performance, but by presenting honestly and consistently what you have genuinely built. Build competence that is undeniable. Not to impress, but to give yourself the internal foundation from which real confidence is born, not borrowed. Manage your presentation consciously. Not to deceive, but to honor the work you have done by not burying it under hesitation and apology. Establish limits and hold them without drama. Not to be difficult, but to demonstrate clearly that your yes means something because your no is real. Assume your own value before asking others to confirm it. Not from arrogance, but from the recognition that waiting for external permission to take yourself seriously is a wait that never ends. Machiavelli wrote for princes and politicians. But the principles he identified operate in every room, every relationship, and every moment where two human beings are trying to understand what the other one is worth and how much consideration they deserve. You are always being read. The question is whether the story being read is the one you have consciously chosen to tell. The moment you take authorship of that story, the moment you stop leaving it to chance, to the mercy of others' interpretations, or to the habits of self-diminishment you developed in environments that did not deserve your full self, everything begins to shift. That shift does not happen all at once. But it begins with a single decision. And you can make that decision right now. Thank you for watching this one through. If this gave you something real, a shift in perspective, a pattern you finally see clearly, a principle you needed to hear, please share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe if you have not yet, because this channel is built for people who want to understand what is actually happening beneath the surface of human behavior. And the next video is already there, waiting for you. Do not leave without watching it.